Emily and I had been planning a romantic getaway to Spain for months. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, a chance for us to explore new places, experience Spanish culture, and grow closer as a couple. We had both been saving up, and the anticipation was building. From the moment we landed in Barcelona, it felt like a dream come true. We toured the Gothic Quarter, ate tapas at outdoor cafes, and watched the sunset over the Mediterranean. Everything seemed perfect. But around day 5, something shifted. Emily started to act distant, distracted. I figured maybe it was just the jet lag catching up with her, or maybe she was overwhelmed by all the sightseeing. She kept brushing it off whenever I asked if something was wrong. She wasn't as excited as she had been during the first few days, and I could feel this weird energy growing between us. I chalked it up to travel fatigue. Then, on the morning of our last planned day in Spain, she dropped a bombshell I never saw coming. We were sitting in a charming little cafe in Seville, and out of nowhere, she told me she needed to find herself and wanted to stay in Spain for a few extra days. Alone. I was completely blindsided. I stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. "What do you mean, stay here without me? We planned this trip together," I said, keeping my voice calm even though I was confused as hell. Emily looked at me like I should have known this was coming. She said she'd been feeling lost for a while and thought this solo time would help her reconnect with herself. Couldn't believe it. We were supposed to fly back together tomorrow. I had already paid for everything: flights, hotels, dinners. And now she wanted to just drop all that and stay behind on some weird self-discovery mission? "Why didn't you say something before we came here?" I asked. "Why did we even plan this trip if you knew you needed time alone?" She gave me a vague answer about how she didn't want to ruin our vacation, but now she just felt like she needed more time in Spain. Alone. I didn't buy it. Felt like she'd been planning this in her head for a while, and I was just the last to know. I was pissed, but more than that, I felt betrayed. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "You expect me to just go back home while you stay here?" Emily nodded, saying she didn't want to hurt my feelings, but this was something she needed to do for herself. I couldn't wrap my head around it. "So you're telling me you're staying here and I'm just supposed to fly back alone?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. Emily nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I've already extended my stay with the hotel," she said, avoiding eye contact. That was the final straw for me. She had already made plans behind my back. The whole thing felt premeditated, like she had just been waiting for the right moment to spring this on me. It wasn't just about needing alone time. She had gone ahead and booked her stay, fully prepared to leave me in the dark. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "You know, this doesn't feel like a finding yourself thing, Emily. This feels like something else." She finally looked at me and said, "Maybe it is, but I can't explain it right now." That was it. She didn't care how I felt. She was focused on whatever she wanted out of this trip, and I was just an afterthought. At that moment, I made my decision. If she didn't want to be with me for the rest of the trip, fine. But she wasn't going to keep enjoying everything I had paid for. I wasn't about to bankroll her solo vacation. So I calmly said, "All right, Emily, you want to stay and find yourself? Fine. But I'm cutting you off financially. Figure the rest out on your own." Emily's face dropped the second I said it. She had this stunned expression, as if she never expected me to take such a hard stance. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. "I mean, you're on your own. I'm not paying for anything else. The hotel, the food, whatever you want to do. Figure it out without me," I said, keeping my tone as calm as possible. She tried to argue, throwing out excuses like, "You can't just leave me stranded," and "I don't have enough money to stay here alone." But I wasn't about to back down. This whole thing had blindsided me, and the way she handled it felt selfish and disrespectful. "I didn't leave you stranded, Emily. You chose to stay behind," I replied. "You made these decisions without even talking to me first. So now you can deal with the consequences." I could see the panic starting to set in, but at this point I wasn't budging. I walked back to our hotel room and started packing up my things. Emily followed me, still trying to change my mind, but I had nothing left to say. I wasn't going to keep being her doormat. She kept pacing, grabbing her phone and frantically typing away, probably trying to figure out how she was going to pull this off. I didn't care. I packed my stuff, booked my flight home, and decided it was time to leave her to find herself. Without my help, as I finished packing, Emily's tone shifted. She stopped trying to argue and instead started pleading. "Jake, please, don't do this. We can figure something out." But it felt hollow, too little too late. I was done with the back and forth. Her decision to stay without me, without even a conversation, felt like a betrayal. "I'm sorry, Emily," I said, standing at the doorway with my bags. "But this was your call. You want to stay, you stay. But you're staying without me." The look on her face was a mix of anger and disbelief. She clearly hadn't expected me to actually follow through. She had probably thought I'd cave in like I usually did. But this time was different. I was fed up. The finality of my words must have hit her, because she just stood there, silent, staring at me. I walked out of the hotel room without looking back. I could hear her calling my name one last time, but I ignored it. As I got into the cab heading to the airport, I felt this weird sense of relief, like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Yeah, it hurt to leave her like that, but it also felt like I was reclaiming control over a situation that had gotten completely out of hand. On the way to the airport, I blocked her on all social media, cut her off from my accounts, and told myself this chapter was officially closed. A few days after arriving home, I started to settle back into my routine. I was still adjusting to life without Emily, but I was beginning to feel more at peace with my decision. One evening, I was scrolling through my phone, catching up on emails, when an unknown number popped up. It was an international call. Curious, I answered. "Hello, Jake, it's Emily." Her voice sounded different, more frantic. I hadn't expected to hear from her at all, especially not like this. "I know you blocked me, but I had to find a way to reach you." "What do you want, Emily?" I asked, annoyed but intrigued. "Listen, after you left, things got bad. I didn't know this, but the guy I was meeting up with in Spain, he's involved in some really shady stuff. I tried to back out, but he's not letting me leave. I need your help." My heart sank. "What? Who is this guy? What kind of trouble are you in?" "Jake, I don't know how to explain it. He's been following me, watching me. I thought he was just some artist, but now he's blackmailing me." Her voice cracked. I didn't know whether to believe her. Was this just another ploy for attention? Or was she genuinely in danger? I felt torn. On the one hand, I didn't want to get pulled back into her mess. But on the other hand, if what she was saying was true, how could I leave her stranded like that? "Why should I believe you after everything?" I asked, my voice cold but conflicted. "I'm sorry, Jake. I really am. I just need one more chance. Please, help me get out of here." As much as I wanted to slam the door on that chapter of my life, I found myself asking, "Where are you now?" Emily gave me the name of a small town outside of Barcelona, somewhere far from where we'd been staying. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping over me. Everything she said sounded too wild to be true. But what if it was? What if she really was in danger? I hung up, staring at my phone. The right thing would be to walk away. After all, she had made her choice. But the thought of leaving someone, even Emily, in such a precarious situation didn't sit well with me. I wrestled with it for hours, pacing back and forth in my apartment. Eventually, I called my buddy Mike, the most level-headed guy I know, and explained the whole situation. "Dude," he said after a long pause, "this sounds messed up. Are you sure she's telling the truth? I mean, she's the one who ditched you, right?" "I know, man. But what if she's actually in danger? I can't just ignore that," I said, frustration bubbling up. "But if I fly out there and it's all a setup, then I'm back in her trap." Mike sighed. "Here's what you do. Don't go back yourself. Call someone local, maybe a private investigator or the police. If she's really in trouble, they'll help. But don't let her suck you back into her mess directly." His advice was sound, and it gave me an out. I decided to follow Mike's suggestion. I searched online for private investigators in Spain and found one with solid reviews. After a couple of emails and a quick call, I arranged for them to look into Emily's situation. 2 days later, I got an update. The investigator had found Emily, but what he told me shook me to the core. She wasn't alone. And the man she was with wasn't just some guy, he had a record, a long one. And there was something else. The investigator's voice was tense as he continued. The man Emily's with is known for running scams on tourists. He's a con artist with a history of preying on people who come to Spain for vacations. This guy has been involved in theft, identity fraud, and a bunch of other shady stuff. It looks like Emily is part of it. I froze, my stomach dropping. Are you saying she's involved in his schemes? That's what it looks like. They've been spotted together in multiple locations where tourists have reported being scammed. He's likely using her to gain trust with potential targets. There's no indication she's in any danger, but it's clear she's not the person you thought she was. I didn't know what to say. Emily had lied to me, not just about this trip, but about everything. How could she be involved in something like this? I felt like a complete fool for even considering flying back to help her. Thanks for the information, I finally managed to say. I need some time to process this. After I hung up, my mind was racing. I thought back over the last few months, trying to make sense of it all. There had been red flags, but I had ignored them, chalking it up to her quirky personality or her supposed need for self-discovery. Now, it was all starting to make sense. Emily had never been looking for herself. She had been looking for her next mark. And I had been a part of her game just like all the others. It was clear now that she hadn't fallen in love with me. She had been using me, and I was just one more tool in her scam. I felt sick to my stomach. I had to cut ties completely. No more games. But as I sat there stewing in anger, a new thought emerged. What if this wasn't just about me walking away? What if I turned the tables? If Emily wanted to play dirty, maybe it was time I fought back. That I was still reeling from the revelation, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Emily had played me for a fool, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I wasn't the type to just roll over and let someone scam me without consequences. I called the investigator back. I want to take her down, I said bluntly. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? That could get complicated. I'm sure, I replied. She's been using me, and God knows how many others. I can't let her walk away like nothing happened. What can I do to expose her? The investigator didn't waste any time. He outlined a plan, one that would require me to gather evidence and make sure Emily couldn't wiggle her way out of it. I still had access to some of her personal information. Texts, emails, even financial records she hadn't bothered to hide too carefully. If I played it right, I could use that to expose her scam without tipping her off too soon. Over the next few days, I dug deeper into her life. I went through old conversations, bank transactions, and photos from our time together. I found inconsistencies in her stories, like unexplained withdrawals from her account and odd messages from people I'd never heard of. The pieces were coming together. Then I hit the jackpot. In one of her emails, I found a message to the scammer she was with in Spain, detailing plans to target wealthy tourists and steal their personal information. The email confirmed everything. She was fully in on the con. With that email and all the other evidence I'd collected, I knew I had enough to go to the authorities. But I didn't just want to hand it over quietly. I wanted Emily to know that I had outsmarted her, that I had taken control of the situation she thought she had mastered. So I devised a final move. I would confront her, but not before ensuring she was exposed to everyone in our circle. It was time for Emily to realize the game was over. And this time, she was the one who would lose. I didn't want to confront Emily in person. Not yet. It wasn't safe, and besides, I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions before I even had to say a word. So I set the stage. First, I forwarded the email I had found to a couple of mutual friends, people who had been around us during our trip, people she had duped into thinking she was a saint. I didn't include any commentary, just the email. It spoke for itself. I knew they'd read it and the truth would start spreading like wildfire. Then, I arranged for her to meet me at a public cafe back home. I wanted her to be in a place where she couldn't create a scene. Plus, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of being in a private setting where she could manipulate me one-on-one. This was going to be a controlled takedown. When I saw her walk into the cafe, I felt a mix of anger and, oddly, relief. The wait was finally over. She spotted me, smiled like nothing was wrong, and sat down. "Hey, babe," she said, completely unaware of what was about to go down. I didn't smile back. "Emily, I know everything," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her expression faltered. "What do you mean?" "I know about the scam. I know about the fake romantic trip, the emails, the money. I know about the guy you've been working with. You've been playing me this whole time." Her face turned pale. What? "No, that's crazy. What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table, showing her the email she had sent to her accomplice. "This is what I'm talking about." Emily's eyes widened in panic. She tried to grab the phone, but I pulled it back. "Not so fast," I said coldly. "I've already sent this to a few friends. By now, half of them have probably seen it." She was speechless, her confidence draining. For the first time, she looked scared. "I trusted you," I continued, my voice now more composed. "I would have given you everything. But you crossed the line. You used me, lied to me, and you thought you'd get away with it. Well, you didn't." Emily stammered. "I can explain." But I cut her off. "Save it. You won't have to explain it to me. You'll have to explain it to the authorities. I'm turning everything over to the police." Her face completely fell as she realized how deep of a hole she was in. The tables had officially turned. Emily sat there in stunned silence. For a moment, she didn't even attempt to defend herself, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. She was guilty, and now she was panicking. She had probably thought she could outsmart me, maybe even talk her way out of it. But not this time. Suddenly, she switched gears. "Please don't go to the police. Let's talk about this. I can fix it." Her voice cracked, and I could tell she was on the verge of tears. The confident Emily I had known was gone, replaced by someone desperately grasping for control. I stared at her, unfazed. "Fix it? Emily, this isn't something you can just fix. You manipulated me, scammed me, and tried to take advantage of my trust. There's no coming back from that." She started rambling, her words tumbling out in a blur of excuses. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think it through. I got in too deep. I thought I could pull it off, and then things just spiraled." I held up a hand, cutting her off. "Enough. You didn't just make a mistake. You planned this. You plotted with someone else, and you tried to scam me. You even thought you could leave me stranded while you found yourself. This wasn't just a bad decision. It was a betrayal." She wiped away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. "Please, I'll do anything. Just don't ruin my life. I'll pay back everything. I'll break ties with him. I'll do whatever you want." That's when it hit me. She was scared of the consequences, not sorry for what she did. She was only trying to save herself. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "You had plenty of chances to do the right thing, but you didn't. Now you're dealing with the fallout." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "But if you report me, my life is over." I stared at her, feeling the weight of my decision. The room was filled with an uneasy tension. Emily's plea echoed in my mind, but I couldn't ignore the facts. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was just terrified of losing the life she had built on lies. Her desperation wasn't for me or our relationship. It was purely for herself. "You're only scared because you got caught," I said coldly, meeting her teary eyes. "You manipulated me for months, and now you're trying to guilt me into staying silent. It's not going to work." Her hands shook as she wrung them together. "Please, I swear I'll pay you back every cent. I'll make it right. You don't need to go to the police." Her voice cracked again, but I could hear the undercurrent of selfishness. She wasn't trying to make things right. She just wanted to avoid the consequences. I stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Part of me was furious, ready to make her face everything she'd done. But another part of me wondered what would be the best way to deal with this without it turning into a public disaster. "I'll give you one chance," I said slowly, leaning forward. "You're going to pay back every single cent. No excuses, no delays. And then you're going to disappear from my life. No calls, no texts, nothing. If I hear so much as a peep from you, I'll go to the police and tell them everything. Emily's eyes widened. What you mean that's it? I can fix this. Fix it? No, you're not fixing anything. I corrected her. You're just getting a way out that doesn't involve jail. But if you think this means I'm forgiving you, you're wrong. This is me protecting myself from more of your drama. I'm done with you. She bit her lip, trembling as the reality of the situation sank in. Okay, I'll do it. I'll pay you back. I'll leave you alone. Good, I said, standing up. You have 1 month to get everything sorted. After that, I never want to hear your name again. I could see the relief wash over her, but deep down, I knew she was just scrambling for a way to save herself. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her with the ultimatum. The weight of my decision hung in the air, but one thing was clear. I wasn't about to let her get off without paying the price. As the weeks passed, I kept my distance from Emily. She knew better than to test me, and I didn't receive a single call or message from her. But I had kept close tabs on her finances through a mutual friend who, unbeknownst to her, was watching for any signs that she was planning to skip town or dodge the payment. Sure enough, she started selling things. First, her designer clothes and handbags, things I had no idea she even owned. Then her car. She was scrambling to scrape together the money, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the real desperation hit. The deadline I had given her was looming, and I was keeping a close watch on my bank account for the repayment to hit. Every day that passed without it was a reminder of the mess I had been dragged into. While I was moving on from the emotional betrayal, the financial fallout still had its grip on me. 2 days before the deadline, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a deposit alert. She had sent me the first half of the money. Not all of it, but enough to prove she was serious about paying me back. I wasn't surprised. Emily was too smart to push things all the way to the edge. She knew I wasn't bluffing about going to the police. Later that day, I received an email from her. The subject line read, "Final request." I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. But curiosity got the best of me. The email was short and to the point. I'll have the rest of the money by the end of the week. I just need a few more days. Please don't go to the police. I'm leaving town for good after I finish paying you back. I've already sold everything. I leaned back, staring at the screen. The deadline was approaching fast, and I had to decide if I was going to grant her an extension or stick to my ultimatum. I had given her 1 month, and she had managed to pull together half of what she owed. It would be easy to let her have a few extra days to finish paying me back, but a part of me wondered if she was using this as a tactic to buy more time. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. She had been sneaky before, so what was stopping her from trying it again now? I drafted a reply, "No extensions. You have 2 days." I hit send, knowing it was now a race against the clock. The days leading up to the final deadline were agonizing. Each minute felt like an eternity as I waited for Emily's response. I kept replaying our trip in my head, the romantic dinners, the walks along the beach, the plans we had made for the future. It felt like a completely different life now, one that was impossible to return to. On the morning of the deadline, I received a text. It was from Emily. "I have the full amount. Meet me in the park at noon. We'll settle everything." I felt a rush of mixed emotions. Relief, resentment, and anger. I had been pushed to this point, but at least I was going to get what I was owed. I grabbed my coat and headed out the door, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. I wasn't sure if I was going there for closure or for revenge, but I knew this would be the final chapter of this story. When I arrived at the park, I spotted Emily standing by the fountain, holding an envelope. She didn't seem too different, but there was a coldness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. She walked toward me, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "Here," she said, handing me the envelope. "It's all there, just like I promised." I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of bills. Everything I was owed, plus a little extra, as promised. It wasn't just the money that got to me, though. It was the look on her face. There was no apology, no regret. Just an air of finality, like this was the end of the line for us. "You're leaving, then?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. She nodded. "I'm going to finish my travels, then start fresh. No hard feelings, right?" I could barely hold back a bitter laugh. No hard feelings? After everything? Emily looked away, her face flushing slightly, but she didn't respond. It was clear that she had already moved on in her mind. The money had been her way of closing the door on this chapter, and she seemed content with that. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "This doesn't feel like closure to me, Emily, but I guess it's over now. I'm done." With that, I turned and walked away. There was no more to say, no more to do. The relationship was gone, and everything we had shared was reduced to money and broken promises. I had done what I had to do. Now all I could do was move on.